Hey, what's up everybody? It's Rutech, and today we'll be talking about the best $2,000 gaming PC for May of 2020. Now for $2,000, you are getting a true over 60 frames per second 4K and 144 and up frames per second 1080p machine for when you're going competitive. I made sure with this build that you are absolutely getting a screamer of a PC for the money that you're paying. This is a performance build, so I didn't put in any gimmicky add-ons or RGB fans. The only thing I made sure that looks good is the case, because it's such a hassle to replace a case if you ever wanted to. RGB fans and all of the other fun RGB things that you want to add, you can go ahead and buy with other money, but for this build, every single penny goes towards performance. So modern games like Warzone and Modern Warfare Multiplayer, Doom Eternal, Apex, Fortnite, Jedi Fallen Order, and all other games that have recently come out are not even a challenge for this PC as you would expect. Along with this, the upcoming games like Cyberpunk 2077, Halo Infinite, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, the upcoming unannounced Call of Duty, and all others will also run, which again shouldn't come as a surprise at all. I mean, if you're paying $2,000 for a PC, it better run new upcoming games. Anyway, aside from gaming, this PC also is phenomenal with productivity, from having a million Chrome tabs open to rendering 4K videos at a good speed. Basically, this computer all around is amazing. So let me share with you guys what parts I decided to use. But before we do that, I would really appreciate it if you checked out my channel. I post PC tech videos among other things. Also, if you have any comments or questions as the video goes along, be sure to drop a comment. If you like the video, drop a like. And if you enjoy the content you're seeing, drop a sub. It really helps out the channel. Now, you can't use your PC unless you have a copy of Windows, of course. So if you need a Windows key for this build or any build, I highly recommend you head over to Digital Chill Mart. Among the other software that they sell cheap copies of Windows licenses. Use coupon code RUTECH to get 5% off. Links in the description. Alrighty, so the first part we will be discussing is the CPU. We are using the Ryzen 7 3800X. Now most would say the i7 is the ideal choice for this price range. However, although that may be true, the i7 is significantly more expensive and would have taken away from other important specs like the strong graphics card I put in this build. In addition, the difference between the i7 9700K and the Ryzen 7 3800K is very small. The only huge difference is actually the price. We're talking about a 3 to 4 frame per second difference on average, which is completely negligible, especially when you're hitting high frame rates already. Anyway, let's talk about the specs of this CPU first up. It has 8 cores, 16 threads, a base clock of 3.9 GHz, a phenomenal 4.5 GHz boost clock, has the beautiful Zen 2 7nm architecture that everyone wants to get their hands on, and is fully overclockable, which is why we're going to be using a very good CPU cooler, which I'll talk about in a second. So the 3800X is a very capable CPU. It can basically do anything you can imagine a godly computer can do, from the basic tasks of office work all the way up to running a very high demanding video game title at 2K to 4K resolution at above 60 frames per second with all ultra settings. Of course, as long as you're using a strong graphics card, which we are. Okay, so next up, the CPU cooler. We will be using the popular, highly regarded RGB Corsair H100i liquid CPU cooler. Now, don't let the fact that this is a liquid-based component scare you off. I assure you that these are very, very easy to set up and install. All of the liquid already comes pre-installed inside of the box, so you won't have to pour any yourself or worry about spilling something on your components. That won't happen. It also comes with its own thermal paste pre-applied, so no need to go out and spend an extra bit of money for other paste. There's seriously nothing wrong with stock paste, especially when it's coming from Corsair. Since this is liquid cooled, using standard clock speeds and overclocking will be great and won't surprise you with any thermal problems. My one recommendation though is to run MSI Calmbuster CPU stress test before you do any gaming or overclocking, especially because frying your CPU on accident isn't really very desirable. Next on the list, we have the motherboard. We are using ASUS's Tough Gaming X570 Plus ATX motherboard. The motherboard does have onboard Wi-Fi, so if you don't have an Ethernet cable or Wi-Fi adapter, no need to worry. This already has a fantastic Intel Wireless AC 9260 built in. Moving on, this motherboard also has a max RAM capacity of 128 gigabytes and a max speed of 4400 megahertz with its 4 RAM slots. For ports, it has a ton. I'll name the notable ones that you'll most likely be using. There's 6 USB 3.2s, a USB Type-C, an Ethernet port, and the default audio jacks. The rest are photographed here. Upgrading also won't be a problem, so if you ever wanted Crossfire, this motherboard is fully capable. Also has a ton of SATA ports, so you can upgrade the storage for days. All in all, a solid motherboard. I usually shoot for ASUS motherboards for the higher end stuff because they usually have the most durable and reliable parts, at least from what I've seen in builds. So in the RAM slots, we'll be putting in the Team T-Force Nighthawk RGB RAM DDR4 4000 MHz memory. This is 2 purchases of 2x8 sticks, so in total you'll have 32 gigabytes of 4000 MHz RAM. 32 gigabytes of RAM for gaming is a bit overkill, as only a small handful of high demanding games recommend that you have over 12 gigabytes of RAM. But if you're into 3D rendering or modeling with high resolution textures, Ultra HD streaming, or video editing, it will highly benefit you. So 4000 megahertz, let's talk about that. 4000 megahertz is very fast, so you're pretty much getting nearly the absolute best performance out of this RAM. One of the PCs I've built for a friend uses Team Group's RGB 3000 megahertz RAM, and the computer still runs just as good as it did when I first fired it up, so this is easily a trustworthy brand that you should definitely buy RAM from. Next up, the storage. We are using Western Digital's Blue 1TB M.2 solid state drive. This is a full 1000 gigabytes of one of the fastest memory units that you can possibly use in a PC build. On this 1TB drive, you'll basically be storing just about everything, as this is the only storage device I put on here. The reason for that is because I feel that 1TB is basically enough for most people. Now, if this isn't enough for you, you can always either get an M.2 drive with more than 1TB of storage, or get an SSD or hard drive that you can attach through the SATA ports. If you do decide to do this, just ensure that you install Windows on this Western Digital M.2 drive, as it'll give you the fastest boot time and overall Windows experience. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that I love Western Digital as a company, as they make some of the most reliable, long-lasting storage devices out there. So this Western Digital SSD will be a great addition to this build. All right, now for the part you've probably been waiting to hear about, the graphics card. We are using Gigabyte's GeForce RTX 2080 Super. The 2080 has 8 gigabytes of RAM, has a core clock of 1650 MHz, boost clock of 1830 MHz, has 3 fans for some great airflow, and of course is overclockable. It also is fully capable of ray tracing, but honestly, in my opinion, ray tracing isn't that great right now, as it takes a huge toll on your frame rate for not that much of a graphic improvement. But either way, it is still ray tracing optimized. So this is easily the best graphics card that you can use for the $2,000 price point, while keeping everything else balanced, of course. There's only a few graphics cards that beat the 2080 Super, and they're all way more expensive than this, so this is easily the best you'll get for this price range. So now let's talk about the benchmarks for Apex Legends, World of Warcraft, CSGO, Fortnite, and Modern Warfare, Warzone, and multiplayer. So for Apex Legends, it looks amazing. At 1440p, you nearly get the great competitive 144 frames per second. On average, you're only getting like 10, 12 below that, which isn't that big of a deal. And then for 1080p, you are getting an average of 172 frames per second. So that speaks for itself. I won't have to tell you guys that that is also a very competitive frame rate. And of course, it'll stay consistent around that number. For World of Warcraft at max settings, it also looks phenomenal. At 2K, you're getting a little bit below 144 frames per second. I'm pretty sure in World of Warcraft, frame rate doesn't matter that much. So I assure you 129 frames per second will still look extremely smooth. And if you're playing at 1080p, it gets even better. You get 202 frames per second, which is extremely smooth gameplay. For CSGO at max settings, it shouldn't come as a surprise that both of these averages are fairly high. CSGO has been out for a very long time, so it's pretty optimized for basically any graphics card you can imagine. So the fact that this can run at over 200 frames per second for whatever resolution you're at is not a surprise. For Fortnite at max settings, it's pretty similar to Apex, as its 1440p average is a little bit below 144 frames per second, and its 1080p average is a good bit above 144 frames per second. But either way, we are still seeing an average around 144 frames per second at max settings, which is great. Finally, for Modern Warfare at max settings, looks really good. Modern Warfare is surprisingly very optimized, especially for a new gaming engine that has only been released last year, second half. So at 1440p, we're seeing a frame rate at 117 frames per second. That's pretty good in my opinion. I mean, Warzone is very demanding, especially with RAM and stuff. So the fact that this can stay at a consistent frame rate above 100 frames per second is great. Now, 1080p, it only gets better. It's above 144. It has an average of 159 frames per second, so extremely smooth gameplay consistently. I'm not going to talk about Valorant because the 2080 Super is extremely overkill for that game, so I'll just tell you guys right now, it'll run Valorant at a competitive performance no matter what settings you're playing on. Just think of it as it'll be pretty similar to CSGO's benchmarks. If you want me to talk about a different game from the next video, drop a comment and let me know and I will add it to the list. Next part, the case. We have the NZXT H710 ATX mid-tower case. Now I don't know about you guys, but I love the simplicity of NZXT white cases. They pretty much force you to look at the beautiful internals of your rig. Now this specific NZXT case has a huge side glass panel, so you'll be seeing all the innards. NZXT cases are also always made with top of the line quality, so there's nothing to worry about in that department either. Now if you don't like this case, that's totally fine and understandable. It isn't for everyone, so don't worry, you can use any case you'd like. Just make sure that it's labeled ATX. If the case you choose has ATX somewhere in its name, it'll be fine for this build. Final part, the power supply. I chose the Corsair RM 750 watt 80 plus gold certified fully modular power supply. So a couple things to go over with this power supply. First and foremost, it's 750 watts of 80 plus gold certified power, which means it guarantees to supply 652.5 watts at 100% load, which is perfectly enough for this build as PC Part Picker estimates the power usage to be 478 watts. This also means that upgrading will be no big deal at all. Next detail is this power supply is fully modular. That means you don't have to use the stock cables that come with the supply. If you want to buy a different design for your cables, meaning like a different color or design, you absolutely can, even if it's from another brand. As you can see here, the cables are fully detachable, making custom cables an option. Last thing, this part comes from Corsair, a well-known and trustworthy brand. It's usually the power supplies that I hear people being iffy about because they've heard these 1 in a million stories about power supplies frying their build or lighting on fire. Well, not to worry, this won't happen, especially with a Corsair power supply. So yeah, that'll do it for this video, guys. If you plan on building this or have built it, drop a comment. My viewers and I would love to hear about your experience with this rig. If you enjoyed the video, drop a like. Have any comments or questions, drop a comment below and I will try to get back to you as soon as possible. And if you enjoy the content you're seeing, drop a sub. Thanks for watching. Peace out.